Okay, thank you so much, Stella. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, Roberta Mullini and all of my students, because in Italy it is night, now evening, let's say. First of all, I want to thank Stella Mattioli for inviting me. And I also want to dedicate this talk to my wonderful female students of the University of Urbino, who continue to follow me even after their degree. So thank you so much. Even though my fascination with crime fiction dates back to my university years, I must confess that Italian detective fiction and female Italian detective fiction entered my sphere of interest much later. One reason is that I had to fight a sort of personal prejudice against the so-called giallo and Italian lady writers. As a matter of fact, my first loves were Dupin, Holmes, Maigret, Sam Spade, Philip Marlowe. So I felt that any radical change of gender and topography might undermine my appreciation of crime fiction. Little by little, however, I was tempted to read some of the novels and stories I saw in the bookstores and whose authors were completely unknown to me until some years ago. My curiosity was further enhanced by meeting some exceptional women who gave an extraordinary boost to the production and circulation of female detective fiction in Italy. One of them was Tecla D'Ozio, who ran a bookshop called Sherlockiana in Milan. Another lady was Elvira Solerio, whose important publishing house based in Palermo is still among the best in Italy with regards to detective novels. And then I want to go to Luciana Tufani, who is the director of a feminist library in Ferrara, the chief editor of the feminist magazine Leggere Donna, and also manager of a small publishing house entirely devoted to women's literature, which some years ago released, among other works, a collection of English female detective stories, provocatively entitled Un mestiere da donne, which is to say, a suitable job for a woman. Now I want to share my screen.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Can you see it?
Yes.
So, okay. Although the novels I have chosen to talk about today are very recent, female detective writing in Italy is not a recent phenomenon. On the contrary, there exists a long tradition of women writers of detective stories. Carolina Invernizio is considered the first Italian female author. She published Nina la poliziotta dilettante in 1909. The title is approximately The Amateur Policewoman. Women, however, had to fight a twofold struggle for literary dignity. Firstly, like their male colleagues, in order to affirm the value of detective fiction as a literary genre tout court, and to keep it alive, especially during fascist censorship in the 1930s and 1940s. Secondly, in order to gradually assert their own rights as women, to appropriate that unsuitable job for a woman, as P.D. James ironically declared in 1972, which certainly did not just mean being a detective, but also being a narrator and a writer. Recent female writers of detective fiction have developed an interest in many different issues, from the history of ancient Rome, for example, we have Danila Comastri Montanari, whose saga includes Mors tua, Cave canem, Morituri te salutant, Qui prodest, etc. in the 90s. The so-called anni di piombo, or lead years, for example, Rossella Martina, Facoltà di Silenzio, 2003. But we must wait a little to find a true awareness of gender issues, domestic violence, homophobia, and the environment, as we shall see. Things, anyway, had changed a lot compared to 1929, when Dorothy Sayers defined women detectives, quote, so irritatingly intuitive, unquote. According to Lynn Pikett, the female detective in the feminist and post-feminist version assumed, in fact, many aspects of the male hard-boiled detective, appropriating various of the conventions and stylistic devices of the masculine hard-boiled novel, sharing the deep inner loneliness of the modern sleuth, engaging in strong dialogue with male authority, taking on personal and political responsibility, and adopting moral integrity versus corrupt society. 1 century later, female investigators show many original elements, such as emotional involvement with the victim and a very strong awareness of the short circuit between the private and the public sphere. From the 1990s onward, as Donatella Izzo observes, women detective writers share an unprecedented emphasis on issues of gender and ethnicity, rewriting in their stories the autonomous, isolated, self-reliant male detective of the hard-boiled school in relational terms. This results in a deconstruction both of the white male bias of hard-boiled detective fiction and of the assumptions of white bourgeois feminism. Well, Italian lady writers have actually started very recently to make hard-boiled choices in their stories. Nicoletta Vallorani, for example, her urban settings in particular inherited and reinterpreted all the characteristics of Hammett's and Chandler's cities as a tentacular nightmare, a living monstrous organism. And her ladies are truly dark in the most radical sense, becoming more and more credible at the very moment when they detach themselves from the male stereotype. See, for example, this novel, which is quite interesting, Eva, by Nicoletta Vallorani. The first edition, 2002, and a very, very recent issue, which is not released yet. It is just coming out in these days. Female protagonists often become even tougher than their male predecessors, who on many occasions just handled huge revolvers without using them, let themselves to be dragged without opposing any resistance, fell into traps set by women brighter than themselves, and suffered from basic insecurity, which resulted in the visual fragmentation of the body, both on the written page and on the screen, and in the labyrinthic, even oniric structure of the plots. So women are becoming more and more different from these models. Today, we find many women writers and women detectives. Several women choose female investigators, such as Marilu Oliva with her Guerrera trilogy. As you can see, Tu la pagarás, Fuego, and Mala Suerte, And on the right side, you see La Guerrera, which is an audiobook. And Barbara Baraldi, for example, with Aurora Scalviati. Here you can see two covers, Aurora nel buio e L'ultima notte di Aurora. As you can see, they are quite recent. And it is quite funny that sometimes, and this is typically fandom-oriented, the writer comes to be identified with her creature. In this case, Barbara Baraldi becomes Aurora and vice versa. And Marilu Oliva is often called La Guerrera, the warrior, the woman warrior. And she has a very successful literary blog, which is called Libro Guerriero, warrior book. This is Libro Guerriero. So the protagonist is comes together with the author. For those who might be interested, one book by Baraldi has been translated in English, and the title is The Girl with the Crystal Eyes. It was published in the UK by John Blake Publishing in 2010. Maybe there are others, but I'm not sure. We also find male authors proposing female detectives, such as the case of Gianrico Carofiglio, with his Penelope Spada, La disciplina di Penelope and Rancore, and vice versa, female authors proposing male detectives, such as Cristina Brondoni, you can see her in your screen, with her Enea Cristofori, Voglio vederti soffrire, L'appartamento dell'ultimo piano, L'inferno degli eletti. I think little by little, we are arriving at a sort of gender balance and are on the way to overcoming the male-female binarism and including LGBTQ issues and everything. The problem in Italy is that we are still influenced by stereotypes. As we can see in a successful TV series, maybe you like it, I don't, but you are free to like it. That is Le indagini di Lolita Lubosco, based on Gabriella Genisi's novels. Lolita is a deputy commissioner of the police in Bari, and she is a beautiful and fascinating woman. As we can read in Wikipedia, I'm sorry I'm quoting from Wikipedia, but this is a must. I have translated it from Italian. In a world obstinately ruled by males, Lolita chooses to remain herself without repressing her charm and beauty, but on the contrary, uses these very virtues to affirm herself and fight prejudice. I don't know what to remain oneself mean in this context, and what are these virtues? I mean, beauty is a virtue. Are we saying that? Really saying that beauty is a virtue? Okay. So in another website, on the contrary, the series is described as a, quote, banal series full of stereotypes. And well, I agree with this latter point of view. We find a thorough analysis of Italian women writers in a survey recently written by Maria Antonietta Antelli in a nice blog, which is called Vitamine Vaganti, Wandering Vitamins. I don't know how else to translate it. This was written on October 16, 2021, so it is quite recent. I have translated it from Italian. So what has changed after the year 2000 in crime production in Italy? The presence of female professionals has certainly increased, almost exclusively represented, however, in the forces of order or in pathologists. Pathologists are so trendy now. Unlike what can be seen in reality, 53% magistrates and only 13% policewomen, all these professionals are generally at the head of adoring and perfectly functional teams. Their fight against crime, both in the roles of the judiciary and those of the police, never encounters obstacles due to gender. This in fiction, not in reality. The problem of sexual harassment is never touched upon, while that of abuse in the family with violent husbands is often present. Why these young women are never able to establish a relationship with their peer remains one of the most curious characteristics of this production, which ends up resembling the love plots of past generations. This is interesting. The clearest characteristic compared to all the previous production is the presence of problematic sex and tormented relationships, not due to violence or stereotypes or harassment, but due to the indecision of the protagonist. Sex is not a joy, but a torment. Well, yes, the Italian female thriller blatantly contradicts Article 3 of S.S. Van Dyne rules. According to him, in a good detective story, there can't be too much love story. I hope everybody knows what I'm speaking about. The famous rules written by Van Dyne many years ago, but you have to know them, of course. And next slide, social commitment is subtly present in all the others, both in the fight against the mafia of Sicilian writers and in the defense of women against family violence. It is not a political commitment alla Camilleri, but a generic appeal for solidarity also towards the migrants. So it is quite interesting that this is happening now. So we are starting to get involved in real things. I have decided to focus the last part of my talk on 3 very recent novels I have particularly appreciated. None of them has been translated into English so far. So it would be a nice exercise for any of you who wishes to become a translator or simply wants to practice Italian written language. These are the titles. Okay, Deborah Brizzi, La stanza chiusa, Mondadori 2018. Mondadori is one of the most important publishing houses in Italy. La stanza chiusa is the locked room. That it is a cliché of detective fiction, but as we shall see, here the idea of a locked room is something very different. The second one is Cristina Brondoni, L'inferno degli eletti, Clown Bianco, which is a smaller publishing house, but a very active and interesting phenomenon in Italy. A very good woman runs it, Vania Rivalta. And the third one is Piera Carlomagno, Il taglio freddo della luna, the Cold Cut of the Moon by Solferino, which is another publishing house in Italy, again, 2020. So let's start with Deborah Brizzi. Deborah Brizzi was born in Milan in 1973, and she still lives there. She describes herself as a feminist, lesbian, and left-handed policewoman. She graduated in history and specialized in history of political thought and gender studies. She joined the police force at 25 and spent several years at the Milan police headquarters, Squadra Volante. She then went on to work at the judicial police of the Court of Milan with investigative duties, participating in some of the most important investigations of the last decade. You may happen to remember the Ruby case in 2013, And her novels are influenced by her work experience and also her passion for gender studies. This is the book. You only see the cover, but it is a big book. See? Quite many, more than 400 pages. Big book. This is her second novel, After Ancora Notte, 2013. It is a noir story, full of ambiguous characters and an oniric urban landscape with much psychology. This is another characteristic of Italian lady writers, much psychology. The main protagonists are two women, Norma Gigli, a police inspector, who we also find in her previous novel, and Marta, a young woman who is going to denounce sexual abuse, but then changes her mind, like many women do. Norma is described as being one with the uniform she wears, while Marta often locks herself up in her room to cry, quote, because she could never say what she thought, unquote. The two women are in fact complementary since they represent two different aspects of a woman, of a person, we could say. The dynamic part capable of resistance and the passive part designated by society as a victim. The novel contains many meaningful statements, such as the following, quote, she knew very well that many people find it easier to use a bias in order to fill a void of opinion, unquote. Such statements are not only functional to the story, but reveal the author's own ideas and values. Brizzi also reserves a bitter irony for the institution of the family, which is a milestone in Italy. Quote, my father, he was the smartest of all illusionists. My mother, somebody who kept telling me, you take away 10 years of my life, unquote. As you can see, this detective story becomes a dramatic mirror of society, of family relations, and a testimonial of authority, manipulation, and trauma. The city of Milan, in the industrial north of Italy, participates as a tragic background where, in reality, the number of people who disappear every year is dramatic. It is a place where, for a woman to be able to recognize her assailer just in time is a matter of survival. And there is love too. There is an element of love, but it is quite nice because it is a sweet, quick, homoerotic, and unexpected sentiment, which is expressed in the whole novel, I mean, more than 400 pages, 3 words. Oh God, 4 words. Oh God, I love her. That's the end. So I'm going to read it in Italian, this passage. Ispettore, ci sarebbe una ragazza, ma non ho capito bene di cosa abbia bisogno. There is a girl, there is a young woman, but I can't understand what she needs. Sente, ispettore, mi scusi se le ho fatto perdere tempo, ma ho cambiato idea. I changed my mind. La ragazza era visibilmente in difficoltà. The young lady, the young woman was ill at ease, was not sure that she wanted to make this announcement. Mi dispiace, ma probabilmente ho esagerato. Non voglio rovinare la vita di una persona innocente. Mi scusi tanto, non me la sento. I don't feel like doing that. I'm so sorry. The problem is that this person is not innocent. Okay, so she's actually scared. She does not want to put herself in trouble. and she convince herself that this person is a good man, but he's not. So after that, Marta si chiuse in camera e pianse. Marta locks herself up in her room and cries. Piangeva dal nervoso. She was excited, she was nervous, she was anxious, she was upset. Piangeva piangeva perché, come al solito, as usual, non era riuscita a dire quello che pensava. She hadn't been able to say what she thought. Non era riuscita nemmeno una volta in quei 7 mesi di convivenza infernale. Not one single time. In those long 7 months. She never could say what she thought. The young woman is afraid she might waste the inspector's time, and she might ruin an innocent person's life, profession. Even if she's been repeatedly abused, and she does not find the force, the energy, to concentrate on herself and on her needs. Marta is crying because she's not able to do and to say what she should do. Therefore, she is twice a victim of the others and a victim of herself. The expression come al solito, as usual, reinforces her lack of self-confidence. In fact, she despises herself for not being as strong as she wishes. I see a person in the chat. Andrea. Ciao, Andrea. Andrea is in Massachusetts. Hi, Andrea.
I just translated the piece so that people could actually.
Okay, thank you. So you can translate it all if you want to, and
I can try.
Published.
I can try.
It is only a little too long, but if you think you are going to live many years, you can do it in your spare time. Okay. Thank you. This translation is really nice. Okay, now another one arrives. Let's see what you can do with these other. Okay, sorry. Okay. This is about lying. La menzogna. Lie e lie. La menzogna è un organismo vivente. Basta piantare un semino e attecchisce e cresce anche nei terreni più ostili e ha fame. She's hungry. La menzogna è insaziabile. Inizia a nutrirsi di un aspetto della tua vita, ma poi non le basta e tende i suoi rami adunchi. She's hungry, she's greedy. Non te ne accorgi, la lasci fare, perché all'ombra di quelle fronte puoi diventare qualsiasi cosa. Sei tutto ciò che vorresti e risparmiando la fatica di diventarlo davvero. La menzogna è la droga più potente che esiste. È di facile reperimento e da dipendenza immediata, perché smettere significa rinunciare a un mondo perfetto. Here, lying is described in a very scientific way, after all, as a living organism and a drug. The author is using beautiful metaphors. And in order to explain what is scientifically called a pathological liar. A pathological liar is a person who exactly behaves in this way. But here we have another kind of lying, which is self-deception, because the young woman, Marta, wants to convince herself that she is exaggerating. So there is this sort of double lying. I prepare some reading suggestions. So if you want to read something more, you can find some interesting critics here. So, and here is Cristina. Cristina Brondoni has a degree in Italian literature, one in criminology, a master degree in forensic criminology. She's also a journalist and often called as an expert consultant in cases involving homicides, suicides, and suspicious death. She has published several essays and 3 novels. She has also appeared in TV shows, and lately she was in the cast of the TV documentary Lady Gucci for Discovery Channel. By the way, Cristina and I are members of the Academy of Forensic Sciences in Italy. So I'm happy that Cristina is here with me tonight. Brondoni has chosen a male detective as the protagonist of her novels. But I must say that she is always very careful to avoid the stereotypes of any kind. In this novel, Inspector Enea Cristofori was suspended by the police and is undergoing psychological training in order to get back to his position. He is a typical anti-hero. He is bad-tempered, either tired or irritable, and in the course of the novel, the reader is alternatively caught between attention to the plot, which is focused on some women who have been manipulated by a sect, and to the investigator's own effort to overcome a trauma which is rooted in his own childhood. So here we have even more psychology, which is a characteristic of Italian women writers, but Cristina handles it in a very, very wonderful way. So okay. This, as you can see, the style is totally different. I rimproveri di sua madre sulla soglia di casa, la prima dose di eroina, l'ultima lite con sua sorella, il sapore delle lacrime di allegria, il sapore così diverso di quelle di tristezza, la consapevolezza di aver più perso che guadagnato, i capelli biondi rasati a zero, il rumore della cerniera della borsa quando l'aveva aperta nella sua stanza, il silenzio di un'umiliazione. Se questo lasciò cadere l'asciugacapelli. Boom. Brondoni here has chosen a style which resembles the rhythm of thinking and the rhythm of breathing. There are many full stops. All the sentences are short. As you can imagine, you are breathing very hard. You are upset. You are sad. And this is a rhythm of her breath. There are no verbs in the first sentences, only flashes, just flashes. And then the last sentence is what the investigation will have to do later. Another part is here we have the she. This she is the female victim. Okay. In the second passage, we have a he, a male protagonist. Che cosa fa? What does he do? Riordinò i verbali depositati sullo scaffale in metallo in fianco alla porta. Era necessario procedere per priorità. Violenza domestica, tentato omicidio, incendio doloso, violenza domestica, stupro, suicidio, abuso sessuale, violenza domestica, altra violenza domestica, Gesù. So the style is quite similar because you find many sentences. They are even shorter with many full stops. And at the end, a sort of epiphany, Jesus, an exclamation, okay? But what the author wants to remark here is the quantity of the amount of domestic violence that these policemen have to deal with every single day. Okay, so domestic violence, rape, suicide, sexual abuse, domestic violence. So it seems that almost all crime revolves around women. Some reading suggestions. Then you can ask questions to Cristina if you want to, because she's here. And now we have Piera Carlomagno. Piera Carlomagno is a journalist. She works for the Naples newspaper Il Mattino and the author of many novels, among which Una favolosa estate di morte and Nero Lucano. She has also won several prizes. Her most recent work is this novel, whose female protagonist is Viola Guarino, a young forensic pathologist who works in Matera, Basilicata. Carlomagno is also the artistic director of the Saler Noir Festival. I find this novel important for two reasons. First, it is set in the south of Italy, and the author shows a great love for her country, full of mysteries and legends. And second, it is a beautiful example of eco-noir, a term by which I refer to detective fiction written from an environmentalist approach. Let me just open a small parenthesis to announce that the next edition of our convention, yearly convention in Urbino, which is called Urbinoir, will be devoted to this kind of literature. You can copy this website, you can connect, you can send proposals, you can also come to Italy if you want to. And let's go back to Piera. The plot of the novel, which is set in 2019, revolves around the murder of a physician who has to deal with the removal of the nuclear waste brought in by the Americans in Basilicata in the 1960s and buried in the ground. This is a hot issue that reveals the author's political engagement. She's also concerned with the social media, the generation gap, with some concessions to the marvelous recipes of food, Italian food and wines of the territory. So if you like wine, you can read and appreciate this book. Okay, Andrea, you can start your translation. La scena del crimine ha sempre qualcosa da raccontare a una persona costante e scrupolosa. E alle 15 dell'afoso 26 agosto, un pomeriggio non bello su cui improvvisamente era calata una cappa grigia da temporale di fine estate, Viola Guarino, medico legale, pathologist e consulente della Procura della Repubblica di Matera per la sua abilità nell'esame dei cadaveri ancora caldi, era stata chiamata a visitarne uno in una villa color cobalto, un vecchio abuso edilizio condonato e trasformato in una invidiabile residenza ultramoderna. Here you can see the presence of the building amnesty or building remission. This is one of the problems we have in Italy. I morti per violenza, and this passage is very interesting. I morti per violenza sono i più infelici nei loro corpi straziati. Non vogliono allontanarsi dalla carne, lasciata così inaspettatamente, senza un po' di religione o un briciolo di gratitudine. La sorvegliano, la studiano con gli occhi costernati degli investigatori. E Viola voleva essere con loro in quei momenti. Viola Guarino sapeva accostarsi ai cadaveri più dei suoi colleghi, eccetera, eccetera. Voleva restare insieme alle anime che anche lì sopra ancora svolazzavano. E da quei luoghi veniva fuori la traccia che di solito non l'abbandonava più. So here we have an example of hairstyle. We start with the crime scene. the crime scene. Then we speak about the territory, about the context. Then we speak about religion and spirituality. The dead people are not only corpses, but they are also souls. And at the end, la traccia. Traccia means clue, the clue. Okay, so it is a sort of journey she makes while speaking of the crime scene. And another part is this: un buon investigatore osserva la scena e riesce a vedere l'insieme, anche se ha solo dei frammenti davanti a sé. Qualche volta capisce che un elemento è fuori posto, che qualcosa manca, che un dettaglio è maledettamente più importante degli altri. Cercare le prove, e questo è l'unico scopo di cristallizzare l'ambiente in cui si trova il cadavere. And this is another important thing. Vedere l'insieme, to have the big picture of the scene, even though we only see fragments. So the capacity to reunite things. We have another reading suggestion, and I'm going to the conclusion, just saying that in conclusion, despite the several differences, both in styles and contents, all of the works I have mentioned and these short excerpts we have read do reveal, in my opinion, an excellent literary quality of the text. For example, the use of metaphors, or the fact that the styles are different, or the different rhythm. And also a great awareness of social issues, ranging from illegal real estate construction, which is typically Italian, to sexual harassment and abuse. I really believe Italian women writers are doing their very best to convince readers that their novels are worth reading, and I hope more novels of theirs will be translated into English and appreciated abroad as they deserve. So I really thank you, and I hope there are no questions for me, but questions to Stella, to Cristina, to Andrea, also to me if you have some curiosity. So thank you very much, thank you. And I have this short list of readings that I'm going to send to Stella. Maybe I already sent to Stella. So now I interrupt this. I want to see the chat. Okay, Andrea, please don't lose all of your translations, because you are really precious and especially very quick. It takes to me hours to translate something, even from English to my language. Just imagine from Italian to another language. So Andrea, thank you very much. Stella.
Oh, there are any questions? Let's see, because then if not, I will ask something. Okay, Andrea has one.
Right, shall I say it now?
Yeah.
I was wondering, you made so many comparisons between these women writers and, let us say, their Anglo-American references. Would you consider the possibility that given this kind of sympathy that these authors have, that at times the detectives have for the culprits, for the objects of investigation, could we see some different connection with, let us say, the European, the continental European detective stories? I'm thinking about Georges Simenon, Maigret, or other, or Jean-Claude Itzot and Fabio Montale, or other authors like that. Have you thought about it?
Yes, it depends on the kind of novel, because if you speak of a thriller, of a noir, etc., it is more likely that the model is American. On the contrary, of course, Simenon is one of the greatest models for detective writers, I think. And also Agatha Christie, for example, because she was one of the first one in Europe, and she's a woman, so she's a nice case. Yes, psychology is quite European more than American. Apart from Patricia Highsmith, I cannot think of any other American crime fiction writer who is so interested in psychology as she is. I was speaking about self-deception some minutes ago, and I forgot to recommend a beautiful book that many people ignore, because it is not one of her most famous books, but Edith's Diary by Patricia Highsmith is a masterpiece in this sense, because it is the story of a woman who has a disappointing life, and instead of changing her life, she begins telling herself stories. So at the end, she believes what she is just dreaming, and she writes a diary, a journal, and in this journal she writes about her other life. And it is a detective story. It is a crime story, not a detective story. It is a crime story, but it is wonderful. I mean, and maybe that could be another model. And also, Italian stories are influenced by territoriality, and that is European as well. We do not only find the city, the urban setting, but we also find the country, etc., like England. Carlo Zaza, say something. Abbiamo con noi un magistrato. We have a magistrate with us. So, and a great scholar. He just published a book, which is here. Okay. Whose title is Le origini del giallo al femminile, the origins of female detective story. And he speaks of English and American writers. But who knows, maybe the next one will be about Italian writers.
Well, if no one else has a question, I have one, but it's kind of general. Let's say I am you know that I read mystery novels and everything, but I also started following some true crime podcasts, and then now are a big hit everywhere. I read this article that said that the majority of listeners of this podcast are women, maybe because women are also a lot of the time the victims of the crimes that are, generally the crimes in general, that are also featured in this podcast. So do you think that this is something that is reflected also in mystery novels in general, like women that started writing crime novels at some point, or reading crime novels because of this attraction? Like, okay, I don't know. It's kind of general, not only for one book, but...
I'm not sure I understand your question, but you mean that maybe women are attracted to this genre because they feel victims?
Yes.
Women that is a great point, because even male detective stories, if you read them very careful, always speak about women who are victims. So women have interiorized this victimization in time. And I think that they are struggling now, they are fighting to liberate themselves from this condition. Now many women writers choose women detective, women who are strong enough to fight their struggles, etc. But they often speak about their condition as victims, just because reality is that, I mean, in Italy, one woman dies every 3 days, and that is official because there are many other deaths that remain unknown. Christina is
yes. Which one is this crime podcast?
It's called Crime Magazine, and hi to everyone.
Hi, welcome.
Hi to everyone. And I have this crime podcast. It's called Crime Magazine. I have this podcast with a colleague of mine. We are 2 journalists from Italy. And we talk about crimes with serial killer and also domestic violence and neighbor violence. It's a very big problem. I don't know in America, but in Italy is a problem. And usually we have comments, and the comments are from women. And they asked us to help them. And at the end of my book, at the end of the, how call it in English? It's the hell of the chosen. It's beautiful. I think it's beautiful. Thank you, Andrea. And at the end of the book, with my editor, she's an illuminated person, I think. We wrote a note about how to have help if you are a victim, and how to have help if you are an author of the crime. Because I think fiction has a responsibility, and we thought to put this note at the end of the book, because we know usually, as you said, Stella, the readers of the crime novel usually are women.
Okay.
I don't know if you can understand my English. I'm so sorry. Yes. The pronunciation is not so good.
Good, thank you. Thank you to both of you. And let's see if anyone has any other questions or comments or anything else. By the way, there is also my other colleague that I didn't see before, Sara Annunziato. She teaches Italian, and she's also interested in crime novels and detective stories. So,
Stella, you must organize a book. We all write something together.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Oh, there is something in the chat.
Now that I think, Ilaria is a big fan of true crime. All the streamers I follow and talk about true crime are women. Good point of view.
Yeah, I never thought about it, actually. Like, I was hearing you talking about all this, women, true crime, the relationship between women and true crime. And I was like, well, yeah, she is a woman. The other one is a woman. The other one is a woman. Oh my God, it's true. So I was really shocked about it. So yeah, it's a really good point of view.
Okay, good. Yes, thanks. Yes, I never thought about it until I read this article too. But yes, a lot of streamers and the most famous one are women, I think. So yeah, in the end, the books, podcasts, it's kind of the same, not the same, of course, but if you like true crime, I think you also like reading crime novels,
Yeah.
Okay, so we are going to talk also about this book, maybe. That's a good idea. And anyone else have something else to say? We almost, we still have a couple of minutes. If anyone wants to say something else.
I did. I have a question.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was wondering if how you would compare the Italian women writers to the American women or other women who've written hard-boiled mysteries. And so as you were talking, I was thinking about someone like Sarah Paretsky, who does a similar sort of thing. She reproduces the conventions of hard-boiled mysteries. She has a character who's violent, she's moody, she's all those things. And she uses the books to expose the corruption of capitalist society and so on. But she also has a thing with the community of women so that she gets away from the individualism of classic hard-boiled fiction. Mm-hmm. And so with some of the themes that you were exploring today, I wondered how you would how you would compare the Italian women writers with American or other writers, women writers.
Unfortunately, we arrive later than Americans. We must gain ground because it is, as you see, these books are very recent, but in America, this kind of stories, this kind of sensitivity, this kind of issues are already normal. I mean, it is in Italy that they were not dealt with. So they are novels to us. They are new, but just because they are Italian, and they have been able to publish them because it was quite difficult for women writers get published some years ago in Italy. So they are very similar, but they come much, much later than American ones. And even now, I think that they lack what you were speaking about, which is very important, the community, the sense of a community, a sort of awareness of a class, of a group. Some women are quite organized, they are friends, they organize things together, but there is more individuality in Italy. Many women cannot speak to each other. Maybe times are not mature. We must wait a little bit to get to this kind of awareness, of a collective awareness of women writing for the same aim, to the same goal. I think that something is moving, but if you compare I had this. I can't find it here now, but I was having a look at the novels, the American novels published by women last year. There is a gap between theirs and others, not between them and all our Italian production, because I'm positive that Christina's novel could stand up in a bookshop, but not all of them. I think we have some way to go.
Okay, bene. I think we finished our time. So thank you everyone for coming. This was really, really interesting. And I hope we can have Alessandra again, yes. Maybe next year to do something else.
Always.
And thank you for all the suggestions. And I will, good evening or good afternoon to everyone. And
in my case, it is good night because
good night, because you're going to bed. Yes.
Maybe young people are going outside now, but I'm not.
No.
Thank you, Stella. You are great. Really.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.